What is up, guys? It's the Sound Alchemist, and today I'm back bringing you 40 facts on the Warhammer 40K universe. But today we are continuing the short story by Fable Wolfe entitled The Last Astartes. If you guys didn't get to part 1, check the playlist below. It'll get you there. Read it. It's really awesome. But as a short summary, in the first part we were introduced to 3 Astartes warriors defending a cathedral going up against a massive orc horde. And they were fighting and, bludgeoning the orcs to death until a warboss basically empowered the orcs once again, and that is when we cut off to part 2. So without further ado, guys, let's dive into part 2 of The Last Astartes. A massive greenskin, clad in mostly jagged steel and crude cybernetics, raised a power claw above his head and unleashed a thunderous whoa. The horde resumed its attack with renewed fervor this time, and Malick quickly realized that this would be their doom. "Give no growl!" The captain's orders was suddenly silenced by a shower of bullets. Malick watched with a clutch of dread as his leader collapsed to his back, chainsword falling to the ground. The horde only cheered another war cry, swarming towards the 2 remaining Astartes. Malick acted quickly and raced for the chainsword laying nearby, batting aside an orc that attempted to intervene. He swiped up the weapon just in time to cleave through an attacker, making short work of yet another greenskin. Marwyn, however, did not fare quite as well. 4 greenskins quickly swarmed him, 2 of them falling prey to his martial prowess, before another scored a wound on the Astartes' leg joint. Marwyn gave a growl of pain, however, he fell to one knee. From this kneeling state, he slaughtered his attacker, batting away another, only to receive an axe driven deep into his shoulder. Marwyn killed this attacker as well, but not before another drove a crude blade under his arm, slicing clean through the weakest point of his armor. With that, he was driven to the ground, a swarm of greenskins collectively bludgeoning and chopping at the crippled Astartes. He disappeared under the horde, as the orcs crested the staircase and set their sights on Malick. Revving his chainsword, Malick summoned all his wrath into an ear-splitting warcry. 2 orcs made for him quickly, and he knew exactly how he could maximize their casualties before they could eventually slay him. With his free hand, he pulled a frag grenade from his belt and tossed the pin. Then, with one arcing slash, he drowned an orc and stunned the other. Grabbing the stunned orc under the arm, he slammed his grenade into the beast's mouth and lifted it with a spin to toss it back into the horde. The orc collided with a few others, knocking them back, before a violent blast of gore and flame exterminated dozens of orcs that aimed to fight him. His small victory was short-lived. The large orc, the one toting a massive power claw, now crested the staircase with an innumerable number of orcs at his side. The greenskin wore an unsufferable grin upon his face, and Malick was determined to change it. Before the orc knob could order his subordinates forward once more, Malick roared his own war cry and charged for the big beast. Surprised, the knob opened fire from twin shooters mounted on his left arm. Each hit either missed or glanced off of Malick's ceramite plating, and the Astartes leapt forward, colliding with the much bigger orc and grappling onto his torso. The knob stumbled, chopping his claw at Malick's shoulder pad to tear into metal. Quickly, Malick slashed with his chainsword at the claw, tearing through many of its cybernetics, before he reeled back and impaled his chainsword directly into the knob's face. The orc gave a pitiful screech of agony as chain teeth dug and chewed through green flesh and hardened bone, spraying dark gore and crimson red upon the Astartes' power armor. The orc boys below, stunned by Malick's sudden assault, stumbled back in fear as their leader's blood spattered across them. Several seconds of screaming passed before the knob suddenly stumbled, Malick's chainsword uttering a deep and sickening crunch. The orc's screams had cut abruptly to silence as he began to teeter backwards. Malick leapt off of the knob and landed nimbly as the orc fell over the edge of the staircase, tumbling downward for all the horde to see. And for a moment, Malick stood silhouetted against the burning sky above, his armor coated in the blood of innumerable foes, his chainsword still growing hungry for the next who dare oppose him. And for that moment, even the orc boys around him seemed at a loss of how to react. This moment stretched on for what felt like quite some time. before one of the orcs finally raised his choppa and yelled, "Whoa!" His fellow orcs joined him in a chorus as they charged once again at the Marine. Several quick swings of his chainsword was all it took to silence them, but yet more quickly crested the staircase. This time, however, the attackers were a little bit different than the rest. Two boys were adorned with crude canister backpacks, goggles, and tubed nozzles. They turned their weapons onto Malick and unleashed a dual torrent of flame, even as their fellow orcs charged towards Malick. The Burnas made short work of the orcs that would have engaged Malick in melee, and so he quickly acted to silence the remaining two orcs. The Astartes charged the shoulder-mounted towards the leftmost Burna boy, emerging from the flames like an angel of death. Terrified, the orc had not a moment to shriek in surprise before Malick's armored shoulder smashed the orc against the wall, stunning him enough to allow the roaring chainsword to tear through his abdomen and spill his guts all over the floor. With that, Malick grabbed the dying orc and lifted him into the air, utilizing him as a shield while the other Burna boy turned his weapon onto the Astartes. The flames enveloped the mutated orc, and Malick was quick to toss it at its fellow. The flames caught the canister backpack of the Burna boy, resulting in a massive blast of bright flame and burning flesh. Among these flames, Malick stood tall, chainsword at his side, ready to face the next wave. Malick fought and fought for what felt like hours, and now his twin hearts could barely maintain the stamina he needed to down every attacker. The orc horde, however, seemed only to diminish in the slightest. Their morale was not lost. Now only individuals brave enough to charge past the staircase would meet Malick in combat, each of them torn to bloody shreds by the indiscriminate hunger of his chainsword. It occurred to Malick that even orcs, in their infinite stupidity, would have by now realized that scaling this cathedral head-on was an ill-fated decision. He had positioned himself well away from the edge of the staircase now, protecting himself from the possibility of the orcs deciding a range attack. Malick had also pulled aside corpses of his fallen brothers, laying them respectfully on their backs with their arms crossed about their chests. In the times between attacks, Malick had a moment to think. He had considered simply abandoning his post, finding a garrison of Imperial Guard or Astartes to which he could lend his assistance. But he had shot down that decision, knowing well that he would likely be punished for insubordination. Yet it seemed that holding this cathedral was a hopeless pursuit. He would die, there was no doubt in that, and with his death nothing would be accomplished. The cathedral would be lost, the orcs given a new stronghold and a greater chance to overthrow the planet. He and his late brethren had guarded this cathedral under the impression that the Crimson Skull's 9th Company would be en route to reinforce, to annex the cathedral as a base of operations at the Greenskin front. But it seemed they were either delayed or would never arrive. Either way, he would surely die before anyone found him. His Vox communicator had been unable to reach anything but static for quite some time, and so he had resigned himself to take with him as many Xenos monstrosities as possible. With a sigh, Malick readied himself for the next wave, and he knew eventually they would come up the staircase. He stood statuesque and determined, and he waited. He waited, and then another hour had passed before he wondered if the orcs had given up. Cautious not to place his head in the sights of any trigger-happy greenskins, Malick peered over the edge of the staircase. The horde had shifted. Now, at the very bottom of the steps, were several crudely designed vehicles rolled up next to the horde. There were turret-mounted weapons on the backs of these vehicles, all of which turned to aim upward and unleashed a swath of impressive missiles. "Damnation," Malick growled, turning tail immediately to find cover. The Astartes raced backwards, and he bashed his way through the cathedral doors, just as the artillery struck its target. Blasts of orange light and black smoke tore through the ceiling of the cathedral, dropping massive chunks of debris down below. The rain of rockcrete did no harm to the Astartes within, but the orcs' crude missiles ignited bright flames and crept along the sides of the crumbling building. Showers of fire and debris now fell about Malick as he closed the cathedral doors behind him. Throwing pews forward to block the entrance, he knew well this would barely slow the horde. Stepping back, he readied his chainsword and pulled free his last frag grenade. He knew he'd had to take dozens more with him before he could die. In mere moments, the cathedral doors buckled against the sudden shock, revealing the greenskin horde from beneath a crack. The orcs yelled another, "Whoa!" giving one final slam against the doors to send them bursting open. At the head, 3 large knobs encased in jagged crude metal raised axes and mauls, and ready to charge Malick. The Astartes raised his chainsword and complemented its growl with his own roar, charging to meet the first knob. He swung a massive axe under which Malick nimbly ducked, driving a slash along the orc's abdomen and tearing into some of the green beast flesh. Malick followed this strike with a swipe of his chainsword, deflecting yet another knob strike and sent him reeling. Another 2 strikes killed several more orc dregs before finally its next attack hit. A knob attacked his right, and with a quick slash caught it by the leg to knock it asunder. Another knob's maul was dodged, only to leave it open to a rippling slash across its face. Malick took a free moment to pop the pin from his grenade and slide it between the alcove and the stunned knob's armor, kicking him backward a second later to erupt into a bloody mess amongst the horde. This attack left the Astartes open to a sudden strike from an axe across the helm, knocking him to his back. Stunned, Malick barely recovered in time to bring his chainsword up to block the axe once more, now blade locked with his foe. This massive orc pressed its full weight against Malick's defense, and the Astartes knew full well that his superhuman strength could not hold it back for long. His chainsword screeched and whirred against the metal of the axe, pushing closer to damage him, spitting sparks between the 2 weapons. Seeing only one chance, Malick attempted to maneuver his feet to push the orc back. Apparently more intelligent than his brethren, this greenskin pinned Malick's leg down with his own, pushing hard with his axe. Above the screech of the weapons and the endless roar of the orc horde, Malick could hear or notice something more. It was in this deadlock, the blade inching ever closer to his face, a sudden flash of light caught the partial attention of the Astartes. There was a swift movement behind his foe, and the weight was slowly pushing his muscles to screaming agony. It ebbed until there was no resistance at all. Confused, Malick watched as the knob's grimace suddenly dropped, his eyes wide in confusion. Then, in that instant, the orc's massive body was cleaved in twain, and it fell to either side, spattering blood all across Malick's already blood-stained armor. In a disoriented daze, Malick tore free his mangled helm and pushed himself up. He was aware of swift movements, screaming orcs, and greenskins flying all over the place. When he had finally managed to his feet, the horde seemed distracted, charging and roaring towards some vaguely seen movement amid their large cluster. Only a single knob remained. Back to the Astartes, Malick seized his chance. With a roar of his voice and a rev of his chainsword, Malick impaled his weapon deep through the orc's side, bringing him to his knees with a quick thrust. Screeching in agony, Malick brought his blade swiftly down between the orc's neck and shoulder, eating through bone and flesh until it finally killed the monster. By the time he had finished off his foe, the orc horde had thinned. What once filled a cathedral to its brim was now only a small group of several dozen. Some orcs stumbled back in fear, others already taking flight for the exit, all while a whirlwind of blood and motion chewed through their numbers by the second. Though he knew not the identity of the enemy or his enemy, he decided it would not steal all the glory. Malick charged once again for his foe, ending an orc with each swing of his furious chainsword. The flames that had once danced along the cathedral roof had now crept down around the building, catching some unwitting orcs ablaze, while the corpse-strewn floor quickly drew flame. In a swath of flame and blood, Malick cleaved orc after orc in unison with his unseen ally before only one orc remained. The greenskin's face, perhaps once painted with glee for his odds of success, was now twisted with terror. He fell to his back, scraping away desperately to avoid the wrathful gaze of the Astartes. Malick approached, slowly, revving his chainsword like a death knell for the unfortunate survivor. Just as the orc attempted to jump to his feet and flee, Malick's boot kicked him to the ground. The chain teeth ripped and teared deep into this orc's flesh. His arms dropped limped with one wrench of the chainsword, stilling the final foe that threatened the cathedral. Once the green skin was dead, Malick turned his attention upward to ascertain who or what had lent him aid. His eyes met nothing but green and crimson corpses, or at least, at first it appeared. But quickly his superhuman vision caught a faint trance. A silhouette veiled in the darkest corner of the cathedral. What could this be?